Comic Book 101. We are back with Sammy from Skeleton Key Comics. How you feeling?
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Week 3.
Welcome back to class, Comic Fam. Hit the subscribe. Slap the like button. We got a giveaway winner.
Yay.
That's right. Stephen Hulk. Hulk 180 is finally getting the love it deserves. Amazing and kind of a controversial opinion, but I digress because we have a full show today. We're getting into more Hulk, Logan. Well, actually, it's not even Hulk. Logan controversy. You know, someone getting their dues on this video. And this show is about the intro to comic collecting. So we want to hit you with some history that may affect how you view particular collectibles. We also have a very special clip from an interview that you did, Sammy.
Yes, with nerdy girl Danielle. Absolutely love her. She is going to reveal how she acquired her Action One.
Not just one Action One, I was surprised to learn, but two Action Comics #1s, and we're talking about first prints. And lastly, we're going to talk about newsstands today. So buckle up, classes in session, and let's give a big thank you to Whatnot, the best new app to buy and sell collectibles, available for both Androids and iPhones. Sponsor of this show. Hit the link in the description. Follow my page. Follow Sammy, Skeleton Key Comics. We are on there every single Wednesday for Whatnot Wednesdays, and we have a packed crew. We start out the day this next Wednesday with Danielle from Nerdy Girl Comics, who's actually on the show today. We also have Milgy Comics, Russ the Comic Sensei. I go on at 5, and I'm going to be doing a 1,000-follower giveaway. Can you believe it, Sammy? I already hit 1,000 followers.
Congratulations. Welcome to the 1,000 followers.
That's right. I'm feeling good. Very grateful to this community. Following up with me, we have Comic Pops. My father, Sammy, and Tony are going to hit the mic after that, followed up by Rage Theo, and ending the day strong with the Golden Age Guru. So come join us over there and follow other dealers on that app because there are some amazing deals happening. Great collectibles being provided to the community. And as mentioned, 60 seconds long dollar bid start auctions. It's amazing. Let's start the show. We have a gentleman named Andy Olson. Sammy, I think a lot of people don't know who this is.
Poor Andy Olson. That's what I've got to say to start. So we have an article that we're going to show with you guys, but his work is in Foom 2. If you're unfamiliar with Foom 2, this is another interesting, it's fun for Wolverine fans.
To say the least.
That way.
Well, you know what?
It makes it sad.
You know what I like about this cover? What I love about this book? First off, it stands for something really fun. Fans of old Marvel. We have a publication that came out in 1973 in the summer, and this is something that was akin to like Marvel Age, something that kind of provided some solicitations, community interaction. Stan Lee was all about that kind of stuff. On the front of this cover, who do we have?
The Hulk.
Drawn by?
Steranko, one of the greatest artists of all time, in my opinion.
We got Sterank all over this cover. Look at the Hulk lifting the title. It's like they had some ideas about how they can utilize the Hulk on covers, and they kept having him lifted up because he's so damn strong. And notice how ugly his face is. This is how Jim would draw him. And on the annual where he's lifting up his trade dress, they'd actually redesign it for that very reason. But on the back, let's give some love to Mike Plug. We have a really cool Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Like this right here is why I really wanted this book prior to learning about the history years ago. But we're not here to talk about Mike Plug. We're not here to even talk about Foom. We're not here to talk about Steranko, even though I'd love to talk about his surrealism all day. Sammy?
Yeah.
We're talking
here to
about,
talk about poor Andy Olson.
We're here to talk about Logan.
Yes.
This is an interior shot of this book.
Oh, you got it? Yeah.
And it's on screen right now for the Comic Fam. And what we're looking at here is a bunch of different characters. Now, Andy would actually be interviewed by Bleeding Cool. When did this take place? It happened a while ago, back in 2014, okay? And what happened in 1974?
Kids would submit their art, fans, friends of all Marvel, they'd submit their art and basically get their work published in Foom 2. And that's where you see what we have up on the screen, where Andy Olson has his work of the Wolverine.
So this is upwards of 6 months prior to the release of Hulk 180. Marvel put out a kind of like a contest per se. They do this often and say, hey, fans of old Marvel, send in your artwork. Make a superhero. Maybe we'll use it, right? Andy didn't even win, by the way. Like little foreshadowing here. Andy would be a runner-up. And in an interview with Bleeding Cool, he'd talk about what went down and how excited he was to see his rendition of a character that he called Wolverine. Now, let me give you a little backstory on this individual. He was a big fan of comic books. He grew up reading Fantastic Four, The Hulk, Captain America, Thor, and he was trying to think of just a fun character, you know, something that would wow the readers. And this was something that the readers of Foom, who would end up submitting this artwork, would kind of daydream about. Will they pick my character? But I think in a larger sense, it was less about the characters being picked and winning a contest, and it was more about having Stan the man, actually see your artwork. Yeah. And just that was cool, right? So we have Andy trying to think about, you know, what to make, what sounded cool. He's trying to think of a cool name. And when he looked up different animals, okay, he was trying to think of something that was, you know, something that would be powerful. So he set to look for a base concept. And this is a quote from the article that Bleeding Cool would publish. I had heard of a creature called Wolverine. From what I knew, it was known to be pound for pound the meanest animal on earth. Not even grizzly bears would tangle with one. A worthy attitude to have when fighting crime. Wolverine it was. So imagine this, comic fam. We have a young kid drawing something, and what would then be revealed to be a very similar looking character to our Wolverine. And we're looking at the sketch here, and he actually made upwards of 10 plus different renditions of the Wolverine. It's actually titled The Wolverine here.
Yeah, the Wolverine, and it, like, you can tell, like, he has like the healing factor. He has the exoskeleton.
Andy even made a note saying, and this is not in the description in Foom, but he says this in the interview. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But he does say he drew metal bones on this character. We are seeing even fur on the back of this gentleman's, on his back, on this shirtless gentleman. We see schematics of his internal organs. Clearly, this was a mix between metal, a human being, and the Wolverine. Now, there's no claws because he didn't think to draw claws on this character. I think that right there would be the needle in the haystack. That would be the big reveal, right? Like, you know, the thing that would be making this a much bigger news than it was even as early as 2014 when this interview dropped, but back in 1973 when this debuted. 6 months after the publication of this, Andy would be introduced to a new character, one that would eventually join the X-Men in Hulk 180 and then full appearance in 181. And the reason why I thought this would be a fun thing to bring up today was after our Hulk 180, 181 conversation last week, you know, I got into a little bit about the prototypes, you know, of Hellboy in particular. And this right here could be described as a prototype. What would you call this, Sammy?
Oh, absolutely. To me, it's just so close. And as like a Wolverine collector, like I remember when Tony and I were first talking about like his love for Wolverine, and we have it now, but then we didn't. This was like one of the top books that he just needed in his PC, Foom 2, because for Wolverine collectors, Foom 2 is real. Like Foom 2 is a thing. Andy Olson created Wolverine in there. So I just... It's just so mind-blowing. It's like, you know?
So we're talking about prototypes. There's an aspect to the collectible that is kind of contingent on the intention. So unlike the Hellboy prototype in the Great Salt Lake City Comic-Con pamphlet that we talked about last week, that was done by Mike Mignola. He put that Hellboy on the belt. He intended this to be a character that was kind of, in his head to a degree, even though it would look very different soon after. This right here is not that. This right here is a fan submission that many believe to have inspired what we know as Logan today. And had this been done a little differently, I'd be interested to see if this book would be more valuable than it currently is. Although this is a pricey collectible, is it not?
Oh yeah, it is a very pricey collectible for sure.
I want to hear from you, the comic community. What do you think about Foom number 2? What do you think about Andy Olson? Did he get had? Is he owed some dues? I have to know in the comment section below. It'll enter you to win a giveaway. And Sammy, next part of the show, we have a conversation with Danielle from Nerdy Girl Comics. Now, what they're about to see is how she was able to acquire 2 copies of Action Comics number 1. And I'll let her tell the story and her get into it. However, what we do have in this video that I want the community to pay attention to is the hustle, the grind, the travel. Many individuals are not going to ever own, or may even they may never see this particular comic book in person, maybe at a convention or on eBay or Heritage Auction sale. There are under 50 in existence that are currently on the census, as you'll find out. This right here is a great example of that upper echelon of collector, dealer, next level, and how they acquired their grail. Everyone has different grails. Everyone has different goals. Their grails change over time. So what I would like the community to kind of focus on is the drive, the travel, the plane rides, the dealers, the bidding war, and the aftermath of securing one of the most important comic books in human history.
All right, Danielle, welcome to Comic Books 101. So to everyone that doesn't know this fabulous being, this is Nerdy Girl Comics from Instagram. She is very well known as the owner of all things Grail. Literally all of the grails that just pop up in your head. You close your eyes, you think of your top 5 grails. She has them. So
yeah, thanks for hanging in my office.
Yeah, thanks for being here, girl. She's also my bestie.
Yeah.
We're bringing her on today to talk about her story of acquiring an Action Comics 1. So where does it begin?
I actually had a copy before this copy that helped me end up ultimately owning really probably the best copy I'm ever going to be able to have, because it's just, 1, impossible to find, but 2, it's so expensive. I first had a 1.5 that came out of an original owner collection I picked up a couple years ago. And this copy that I had prior to the one that's ultimately my keeper copy is something that we had been chasing for a decade. Wow. You know how you get those emails from people and they're like, oh, I have an Action Comics 1 that was my grandfather's.
Yeah, I remember that email I got.
And 90% of the time, it's a reprint or it doesn't exist. Well, so every year, once a year, the owner and I would check in with each other and be like, hey, how's it going? Are you ready to sell the book yet? And every year it's no. And then finally he's like, okay, it's time. Booked a flight. And when we got there, the guy is like, yeah, by the way, my brothers wanted a second opinion just so that we made sure we were getting a fair price, and brought in a couple of other big dealers and ultimately created a bidding war. And if you know me, you know I only play to win. So
this is really true.
Right. Winner takes all. It was an Action Comics 1-400 complete run. It was an original owner, but there were a lot of issues that he bought personally off the stand over time. And then he also went back and acquired other copies. And with that, there was also all these Silver Age keys. There were probably 800 books total. And I knew someone who was looking for that Action 1. And so we worked out a deal, sold that one, and a private collector was like, oh, I heard you sold an Action 1. Do you want to buy mine? Mm-hmm. So at the time, I was in San Diego with my daughter for Comic-Con and worked out the timing. I ended up having to fly from San Diego back to Florida to drop my daughter off, stayed home for 2 hours, changed my suitcase, flew back to the airport, drove back to Tampa so I could jump a flight to go back to the West Coast, rented a car, drove like an hour in Washington, did the deal, came back, jumped on a flight, came home, and ultimately landed this copy. This way.
Oh my gosh.
Action Comics 1.
So for those of you that don't know, what is Action 1? What is that comic?
Comics 1 is probably the most important comic book ever produced. It's the origin and first appearance of Superman from 1938.
That's insane.
And I think we were just looking up the census. And what did I say? There's like 43 unrestored copies, period, in existence that are graded. Like maybe there's a couple more, but there's less than 50 unrestored copies of Action Comics 1 in existence.
That's a golden age comic.
Oh yeah, for
1938.
Sure. Yeah.
What would you say like Action 1s are valuing at today?
I would not sell mine for $1 million. I would easily say no. And I know that like most people will probably be like, what in the world? But how many more times am I going to have an opportunity to own one? There's a 3.0 coming, like slim to none. It took me forever, one, to land the one I sold to obtain this one. And prior to that, I hadn't had one in years. We'll find out soon because there's a 3.0 coming to auction in the next few weeks. Yeah. So that's exciting.
Wow. Are you going to chase it?
I mean, there's definitely a price that I would pay for it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to share that price in case anyone sees this.
In case any of you newbies out there about to drop $1 million on a comic book. That's incredible. That's insane. I'm assuming you flew. There's no way you're sticking that book in the mail.
I was not comfortable sending it through the mail. So yeah, it's definitely like you pick that up in person and you keep it on you at all times. You do not let it out of your sight.
You don't.
Sleep with it under the pillow, put it in your carry-on bag, and you keep that bag under your seat because so no one can even touch it.
That's basically like mailing a briefcase of $1 million cash. And
yeah. I mean, it's more than houses. I mean, probably some people, I've shipped like video games for like 6 figures, but I would not be willing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's personal preference.
Yeah. For me, it's like for $1,000 to fly back and forth and know that nothing will happen to this along the way. Okay.
Yeah.
Worth it.
So it took you how long to secure the first one that you ever had that you were chasing?
Ever? Or like this?
From the moment you were like, I want an Action 1 to the moment you had one. Was it over a decade?
No, because I've owned other copies along the way, but I've never been able to keep them. Like it's always been like, it's a sacrifice, right? Because you want to keep your business going and you need to pick and choose your moments. And finally, it's like, I can do it.
What was your reaction? Like, how did it feel?
Oh, it was exhilarating. It was like, you know, like that sound where like the angels all start singing. Yeah. And like the light beams around you. That's what it felt like. It felt magical.
This is insane.
And proud.
Yeah, I bet you were proud. Look at that.
Yeah, the most like iconic and most used image probably in existence. I mean, really.
It's been homaged 100,000 times, right?
Yeah. So.
Origin, first appearance of Superman. First appearance of Lois Lane and Zatara.
Yeah.
But most importantly,
Superman. There you have it.
Thanks
Action Comics 1.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. One day. Goals.
Hashtag goals. Hashtag you can too.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can do it.
Well, 40 of you can. 39, right?
39, because I have one.
An amazing story. Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing that with us. An amazing collectible, I presume, to see in person. Go follow Nerdy Girl Comics on Instagram and on Whatnot. She joins us at 3 p.m. every single Wednesday.
Yes, absolutely. And next, we're getting into the newsstand versus the direct conversation.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's Comic Book 101, comic fam. We have two different ways that comic books get distributed. The first is the direct market. This is when individuals order things directly from a source. The newsstand is really those OG ways that comics used to be sold. And really that's happening less and less. And you're going to see here on this graph, which I will show you right here, right now, over time has gone from back in 1979, upwards of 94% of the market share was sold on a newsstand, on the streets, get your newspaper kind of stuff, all the way to 2013, where a mere 1% is actually sold on newsstands. So the way that you're going to be able to tell the difference, there's a handful of ways that comics indicate the difference between a direct and a newsstand. I recommend the community download the best comic app in existence, Key Collector Comics. Use code TOM101 to unlock a free 2-week subscription. But the database of all the comics and pictures of said comic books and editions of those comics are there for you to see, so you can see every example, because we can fill up an entire show, multiple series on all the different versions of books that they've released. However, the big indicator is the way that they would keep track of these comic books, which was done by a barcode. Some comic books have like a Spidey symbol in the bottom left. We'll show some examples here in a second. Others have a barcode. That barcode was meant so that the newsstand owner, the person actually doing the transactions with the clients, would be able to catalog what they were selling, because newsstands were essentially the publisher's comic books that were then distributed and sold there. It was like they were taking up room on the newsstand amongst other magazines. The direct market was reserved for LCSs to purchase the comic books at a risk and hold them in shop. What I mean by that is, back in the newsstand days, the publisher would just send in a comic book. They'd get bundles of these things and they put them on the shelf, on the newsstand, on the spinner rack, where they would sit. And if something didn't sell, they would send them back. They would destroy them. They would work out a deal with the publisher on what they had to do. But the bottom line is, they weren't taking the same type of risk that an LCS, a local comic shop, would have to take. An LCS, on the other hand, would be purchasing these comics from the publisher, because they would take orders in, like a subscription, so that they had an approximate count of what they needed. And then they would have also like an added layer of comics they would purchase in case people walked into their store and wanted to buy something. Thus, the LCS was created, because now you have a one-stop shop to get your new comics, but also what we call back issues.
All right. So for our audio listeners, I'm going to hit you guys with the distribution percentages of newsstand and direct. So I'm going to start with the year, hit you with the newsstand percent, and then the direct. So in 1979, it was 94% and 6%. In 1982, 80% and 20%. 1986, 50% and 50%.
And I'm going to just add a little point here. This is when the LCS began to become prevalent. That's why we see a 50-50 percentage split, but it changes very quickly.
Oh, yeah. For sure, like real fast. Because in 1990, it's 15% and 85%. 1995, 10% and 90%. 2000, 5%, 95%. And in 2005, it's 2% and 98%. And then in 2013, we see 1% newsstand, 99% direct.
We're in 2021 now, and the percentages are pretty much the same. Let's take a look at some comic books here. I have Key Collector Comics pulled up, and we're looking at an Amazing Spider-Man 300 newsstand. Average high sale, and we're not talking about graded sales. We're talking about the average high sale, 9.2 or so and above, exceeding $1.3 thousand. Now, when we look at this particular comic book, you're going to notice the barcode on the bottom left. That is literally all we're talking about as far as the difference between this book and the direct market copy. Now, why that's important is because this particular comic book means that it was not sold at an LCS, and that's what matters. But bear with me because we're going to explain why that matters here in a second. Then we look at an ASM 300 direct market copy. This right here, as you can see, has a Spider-Man logo on the bottom left and a different price, upwards of $400 cheaper for a high grade, low near mint copy. Now, this particular comic book is very, very wanted because it's the first full appearance of Venom. However, it's also very wanted in a newsstand. Now, Sammy, can you describe reasons why we would see the price of a newsstand be worth more in a collector's eyes than a direct market copy?
So when it comes to the newsstand, for a lot of collectors, especially those who collect rarity, right? They're going for these 9.6 and 9.8 in the newsstand in particular. And the way that really correlates with the price is because just imagine what a newsstand comic has been through, right? The random states that get the random downpours where it's sunny 1 second, like South Carolina, and literally raining, like downpouring 5 minutes later, or all the kids that walked by the spinner rack outside and put their hands all over these books while they're eating their ice cream, like the sky's the limit. Just even like an adult looking through these issues, they're not bagged and boarded. They're just sitting on the stand, any type of stand outside in the elements, dust, smog, rain, fingerprints, dirty hands, all of the things. So when these comics make it through all of the things, literally all the things that you see out and about walking in the city or downtown, that comic book survived all of that and made it to be a 9.6 or a 9.8, which even today, honestly, is kind of hard to acquire.
Comic fan, we have to stress that the difference between newsstand and direct as it pertains to collectible value, it's all about the grades, specifically 9.6 and 9.8. And 9.6 is kind of a new phenomenon. Really, up until the last year and a half, people didn't care about a 9.6 newsstand versus a direct market copy. However, because the 9.8s have gone just to the moon at this point, well, now members are hunting for 9.6s and seeing that they are indeed fairly scarce, not as scarce as the 9.8. Like, Sammy, think about, people who deal with newspapers and how, when they're doing like the paper boy, paper girls type of thing, they're taking the newspaper out, they're throwing it, trying to hit the door so they don't have to get out their door and, off their bike or whatever, You think about USPS, how they handle things. These comics, there are pictures of these online where you can see how they were packaged and delivered to these newsstands. They were in stacks. They were wrapped just like newspapers were wrapped with a string around it on all sides of the covers, essentially making every one of the top 10 and bottom 10 minimum VF copies at best. Solid spine ticks. Yeah. Then, as you mentioned, having to deal with the elements, kids. These newsstand dealers, they didn't care about these as collectibles. If anything, they were more concerned about getting rid of them. That's actually how we got things like overspray, the paint that you may see on the tops of some comic books, or date stamps. These types of things were indicators that these newsstand dealers would put on the comic books so they knew what was old and what was new, so they can keep track. They're dealing with a lot of other things besides comic books. They didn't care as much as we do today, and that's why these prices are so much higher in high grade specifically. However, I think it's also fair to note that there are members of the community, we're looking at this graph here, the 50-50 split happened in 1986. Some people may go, man, well, in 1982, the majority of these copies that were newsstands made up the market, 80% in 1982. So should we be looking at these dates prior to 86 the same as post 1986 because there was a plethora of newsstands versus direct market? And I say no.
Just using our shopping perspective, right? Over probably around 30,000 comics. Okay. So a lot of them are newsstand, like a lot of them. But what I have noticed is a lot of them are absolutely nowhere near high grade. nowhere near high grade. And that makes me feel like even though there was 80% in 1982, just from what I've personally seen, the books I've seen, and I can tell you I have not seen a high grade newsstand come in our shop that I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get this graded because it's so gorgeous. I've seen newsstands that look like they were on a newsstand.
Absolutely.
So I feel like the fact that, there was 9 or 15% in 1990 were newsstands. I feel like comics were looked at more as collectible then. And, in 1982, where there's 80%, I still feel like personally that a massive amount of those books were beat up because they were on the newsstand rack.
I'm going to hit the community with another example of a key comic, but a modern one that has a newsstand edition, which means that it marks under 5% of the market share, approximately 1%. Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Amadeus Cho, a great spec character, next-gen hero, and one that is quite pricey. We're looking at a $425 high average sale for a direct market copy. And for our audio listeners, this has a barcode for both editions. This is why you got to download Key Collector Comics. This particular direct market copy, though, above the barcode says direct edition. That's how you're able to tell the difference between this one and the newsstand, which, as you can see here, doesn't have the words direct edition. Now, this is a unique book for a very particular reason. The 1% distribution has actually made it so that the lower grades of raw copies are selling for an inflated amount. And it makes sense, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with the fact that that 1% does feel different because I keep using my husband, Tony, for example, but he just really, really loves collecting rarity. He's been collecting for a lot longer than I have. And I see this in a lot of my friends in the community and our customers as well. They reach that point in their collecting where they've been collecting for so long that it's like, what can I do to make my PC like top notch? And they enjoy the rarity. And I see that so much. So I can just imagine being separate from that 99%. 99% have that direct edition barcode, and only 1% of collectors have that opportunity to have it in that newsstand. So that high of having that that particular item, that particular collectible that's just so much rarer than the rest in general. I see that so much, and especially in those who have been collecting for so long.
Yeah, it's like rarity is becoming more exciting than the grade itself. Coupling that with, you may never see a newsstand available come to market, again for some of these books. And you may be waiting another year before one comes up. And maybe that one that comes up is a VF. In that moment, if the buyer is there, if Tony is there, they may throw down the money just to secure it because they may not see one for quite some time. I happen to know that ASM 300 at 9.8, the newsstand, when that comes to market, it's a big deal. We all watch it. Dealers are waiting to see where it ends up. However, the most excited newsstand collectors, they're all waiting patiently for ASM 298, Todd McFarlane's first Spider-Man, and 299, cameo appearance of Venom, Todd's second Spider-Man, to show up on Heritage at a 9.8. There hasn't been one. There's no recorded sales for it as far as I know, and there certainly aren't recorded sales for those two issues on eBay. And when those come to market, they're bound to break records. Comic fam, hit the subscribe, slap the like. I have to hear your thoughts about newsstands. We'll hit the mic next week and talk about your comments. It'll enter you to win a copy of this gorgeous Zoe Lucky Haha issue number 3, a virgin copy and an exclusive. Sammy, what do you got going on over there? Anything fun happening on your channel?
Tony and I will be back Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, doing a little bit of Q&A, branching off of the show. We will also be going to Reggie's Garage Con. So we're going to be doing some footage there and dropping it on YouTube as well. You can find us there at Skeleton Key Comics. We're on Instagram. We kind of like share all of the things between like our Instagram and our YouTube because yeah, we are a shop, but we also love to collect, and we just do like the family comic thing. We just share all the behind the scenes and just every part of collecting, just all of it. But then you can also find us on Whatnot Comics, skeleton _key _ comics. We're there with the $1 start bids Wednesday nights for Whatnot Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Nerdy Girl and I, which you just met with her Action Comics 1, we do a Silver and Bronze Age morning sale every Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but we make it worth it.
Comic fam, all the links are in the description. Go support Sammy and Tony, Danielle, and as always,
geek responsibly.
Enough said. Comic fam, we got 2 other videos for you to check out. The last Comic Book 101 video with Sammy. Retake the lesson if you want. We made it for you. And then down here, we got the Trending 10. An Overstreet Price Guide advisor joins me on the mic every single week to talk about the comics that are moving and shaking, spiking, that you may own. Have a great week.